Hello everyone, this is Srijit and welcome to MCAC 35 Advanced Database Management Systems. Today we will start a new module, Object-Based Databases. In this module, we will first explain the motivation for the development of complex data types. We then study object relational database systems, specifically using features that were introduced in SQL 99 and SQL 2003. We then address the issues of supporting persistence of data that is in the native type system of an object-oriented programming language. Two approaches are used in practice: object-oriented database systems and object relational mapping. Finally, we outline situations in which the object relational approach is better than the object-oriented approach and vice versa, and mention criteria for choosing between them. So, object-based databases. Traditional database application consists of data processing tasks such as banking and payroll management, which are relatively simple data types that will well suited to the relational data model. As database systems were applied to a wider range of applications such as computer-aided design and geographical information systems, limitations imposed by the relational model emerged as an obstacle. The solution was to the introduction of object-based databases, which allow one to deal with complex data types. Complex applications domains require correspondingly complex data types, such as nested record structures, multi-valued attributes, and inheritance, which are supported by traditional programming languages. Traditional database systems are unable to provide such types, even though ER and extended ER models supported them. Had to be translated to simpler SQL data types. The second obstacle was the difficulty in accessing database data from programs written in programming languages such as C++ or Java. Merely extending the type system supported by the database was not enough to solve this problem completely. Difference between type system of the database and the type systems in the programming language make data storage and retrieval more complicated and need to be minimized. It is desirable for many applications to have programming language constructs or extensions that permit direct access to data in the database without having to go through an intermediate language such as SQL. Then we'll see the object relational data model, which extends the relational data model by providing a richer type system including complex data types and object orientation. Relational query languages, in particular SQL, need to be correspondingly extended to deal with the richer type system. Such extensions attempt to preserve the relational foundations, in particular the declarative access to data, while extending the modeling power. Object relational database system, that is database systems based on the object relation model, provide a convenient migration path for users of relational database who wish to use object-oriented features. Thus, object relational data models extend the relational data model by including object orientation and constructs to deal with added data types. It allows attributes of tuples to have complex types including non-atomic values such as nested relations, and it preserves relational foundations, in particular the declarative access to data, while extending the model power. And it also have an upward compatibility with existing relational languages. Now let's see the complex types. In recent years, demand has grown for ways to deal with more complex data types. Consider, for example, addresses. While an entire address could be viewed as an atomic data type or type string, this view would hide details such as street addresses, city, state, and postal code, which could be of interest to queries. On the other hand, if an address were represented by breaking it into components, say streets, address, city, state, and postal code, writing queries would be more complicated since they would have to be mentioned each field. A better alternative is to allow structured data types that allow a type address with subparts: street address, city, state, and postal code. With complex type systems, we can represent ER model concepts such as composite attributes, multi-valued attributes, generalization, and specialization directly without a complex translation to the relational model. We know first normal form. which requires that all attributes have atomic domains. The assumptions of first normal form is a natural one in the database application examples we have considered before. However, not all applications are best modeled by first normal form relations. For example, rather than view a database as a set of records, users of certain applications view it as a set of objects or entities. These objects may require several records for their representations. A simple, easy-to-use interface requires a one-to-one correspondence between the user's intuitive notion of the object and the database system's notion of the data item. Consider, for example, a library application, and suppose we wish to store the following information for each book: the book title, a list of authors, publisher, and set of keywords. We can see that if we define a relation for the preceding information, several domains will be non-atomic. Like authors, a book may have a list of authors which we can represent as an array. Keywords, if we store a set of keywords for a book, we expect to be able to retrieve all books whose keywords include one of specified keyword. Thus, we view the domain of a set of keywords as non-atomic. The publisher, unlike keywords and authors, publishers does not have a set valued domain. However, we may view publisher as consisting of the subfield name and branch. This makes the domain of publisher non-atomic. You can see the details in the figure. For simplicity, we assume that the title of a book uniquely identifies the book. We can then represent the same information using the following schema, where the primary key attributes are underlined: authors, title, author, position; keywords with the title, keyword; books for with the title, publisher name, and publisher branch. The above schema satisfies fourth normal form. Although our example book database can be adequately expressed without using nested relations, the use of nested relations leads to an easier to understand model. The typical user or programmer of an information retrieval system thinks of the database in terms of books having sets of authors as the first normal form design models. The fourth normal form design requires queries to join multiple relations, whereas the first normal form design makes many types of queries easier. On the other hand, it may be better to use first normal form representation in other situations. The ability to use complex data types such as sets and arrays can be useful in many applications but should be used with care. Like see the complex types in SQL. Extensions introduced in SQL 99 to support complex types that include collection and large object types that are nested relations are an example of collection type. And structure types, nested record structure like composite attributes, inheritance, object orientation that including object identifiers and references, but are not fully implemented in any database systems currently. But some features are present in each of the major commercial database systems. You can read the manual of your database system to find out whether it supports these features or not. Now let's see the structure types and inheritance in SQL. Structured types. Structured types allow composite attributes of ER design to be represented directly. For instance, we can define the following structure type to represent a composite attribute name with a component attribute first name and last name. So for that we'll do like this: create type name as first name with varchar 20 size, last name the varchar 20 size, and final. Similarly, the following structure type can be used to represent a composite attribute address. Create type address as street varchar, city varchar, zip code varchar, not final. Such types are called user-defined types in SQL. The final and not final specifications are related to subtyping, indicating whether subtypes can be created, which we will discuss later. We can now use these types to create composite attributes in a relation by simply declaring an attribute to be one of these types. For example, we could create a table person as follows. Create table person, name as type name, address as type address, date of birth as type date. The components of a composite attribute can be accessed using a dot notation. For instance, name.firstName returns the first name component of the name attribute. An access to attribute name would return a value of the structure type name. We can also create a table whose rows are of a user-defined type. For example, we could define a type person type and create the table person as follows. Create type person type as name of type name, address of type address, date of birth of type date, not final. Create table person of person type. An alternative way of defining composite attributes in SQL is used to unnamed row types. For instance, the relation representing person information could have been created using row types as follows. Create table person R name row first name varchar 20, last name varchar 20, address of row street varchar 20, city varchar 20, zip code varchar 9, date of birth date. This definition is equivalent to the preceding table definition, except that the attributes name and address have unnamed types and the rows of the table also have an unnamed type. The following query illustrates how to access component attributes of a composite attribute. The query finds the last name and city of each person. Select name.lastname, address.city from person. A structure type can have methods defined on it. We declare methods as part of the type definition of a structure type. For example, create type person type as name of type name, address of type address, date of birth of type date, not final. Then we will define a method age on date as an argument. It returns interval year. We create the method body separately. Create instance method age on date with argument on date of type date. It returns interval year. So for person type, begin return on date minus self dot date of birth and end. So the method body is defined between begin and end. Note that the for clause indicates which type this method is for, while the keyword instance indicates that this method executes on an instance of the person type. The variable self refers to the person instance on which the method is invoked, just like this pointer in your programming languages. The body of the method can contain procedural statements, which we saw earlier. Methods can update the attributes of the instance on which they are executed. Methods can be invoked on instances of a type. If we had created a table person of type person type, we could invoke the method age on date as illustrated below to find the age of each person. Select name.lastname age on date of current date from person. In SQL 1999, construction functions are used to create values of structure type. A function with the same name as the structure type is a constructor function for the structure type. For instance, we could declare a constructor function for the type name like this. Create function name, first name varchar 20, last name varchar 20. These two are the arguments that returns name, and the body begin set self.firstName is equal to first name, set self.lastName is equal to last name, and end. We can then use the new name John Smith to create a value of type name. We can construct a row value using listing its attributes within parentheses. For instance, if we declare an attribute name as a row type with the components first name and last name, we can construct this value for it without using a constructor. By default, every structure type has a constructor with no argument, which sets the attributes to their default values, called the default constructor. Any other constructors have to be created explicitly. There can be more than one constructor for the same structure type, although they have the same name. They must be distinguished by the number of arguments and type of their arguments, or simply the signature of that function. The following statement illustrates how we can create a new tuple in the person table. We assume that a constructor has been defined for address, just like the constructor we defined for name. So insert into person values, new name John Smith, new address 20 Main Street, New York 11001, date 1968-22. Now let's see type inheritance. Suppose that we have the following type definition for people. Create type person, name varchar, address varchar. We may want to store extra information in the database about people who are students and about people who are teachers. Since students and teachers are also people, we can use inheritance to define the student and teacher types in SQL as follows. Create type student under person, degree varchar, department varchar. Create type teacher under person, salary integer, department varchar. Both student and teacher inherit the attributes of person, namely name and address. Student and teacher are said to be subtypes of person, and person is the supertype of student as well as of teacher. Methods of a structured type are inherited by its subtypes, just as attributes are. However, a subtype can redefine the effect of a method by declaring the method again using overriding method in place of method in the method declaration. The SQL standard requires an extra field at the end of the type definition whose value is either final or not final. The keyword final says that subtypes may not be created from the given type, while not final says that subtypes may be created. Now suppose that we want to store information about teaching assistants who are simultaneously students and teachers, perhaps even in different departments. We can do this if the type system supports multiple inheritance, where a type is declared as a subtype of multiple types. For instance, if your type system supports multiple inheritance, we can define a type for teaching assistant as follows. Create type teaching assistant under student, teacher. Teaching assistant inherits all the attributes of student and teacher. There is a problem, however, since the attributes name, address, and department are present in student as well as in teacher. The attributes name and address are actually inherited from common source person. So there is no conflict caused by inheriting them from student as well as teacher. However, the attribute department is defined separately in student and teacher. In fact, a teaching assistant may be a student of one department and a teacher in another department. To avoid a conflict between the two occurrences of the department, we can rename them by using an as clause as in the definition of the type teaching assistant. So create type teaching assistant under student with department as student department, teacher with department as teacher department. In SQL, as in most other languages, a value of a structured type must have exactly one most specific type. That is, each value must be associated with one specific type called its most specific type when it is created. By means of inheritance, it is also associated with each of the supertypes of its most specific type. For example, suppose that an entity has the type person as well as the type student, then the most specific type of the entity is student, since student is a subtype of person. However, an entity cannot have the type student as well as the type teacher unless it has a type such as teaching assistant, that is a subtype of teacher as well as of student. Now let's see what is stable inheritance. Subtables in SQL corresponds to the ER notion of specialization or generalization. For instance, suppose we define the people table as follows. Create table people of person. We can then define table students and teachers as subtables of people as follows. Create table students of student under people. Create table teachers of teacher under people. The types of the subtables, the student and teacher in the above example, are subtypes of the types of the parent table, a person in the above example. As a result, every attribute present in the table people is also present in the subtable student and teachers. Further, when we declare students and teachers as subtables of people, every tuple present in the student or teachers become implicitly present in people. Thus, if a query uses the table people, it will find not only tuples directly inserted into that table, but also tuples inserted into its subtables, namely students and teachers. However, only those attributes that are present in the people can be accessed by that query. SQL permits us to find tuples that are in people but not in subtables by using only people in the place of people in the query. The only keyword can also be used in delete and update statements. Without the only keyword, a delete statement on a subtable such as people also deletes tuples that were originally inserted in subtables, such as students. For example, a statement delete from people where P would delete all tuples from the table people as well as its subtable students and teachers that satisfy the condition P. If the only people is added to the above statement, tuples that were inserted in subtables are not affected, even if they satisfy the where clause conditions. Subsequent queries on the super table would continue to find these tuples. Conceptually, multiple inheritance is possible with the tables just as it is possible with the types. For example, we can create a table of type teaching assistant as create table teaching assistants of teaching assistant under students, teachers. As a result of the declaration, every tuple present in the teaching assistant table is also implicitly present in the teachers and in the students table, and in turn in the people table. There are some consistency requirements for subtables. We say that tuples in a subtable and parent table correspond if they have the same values for all inherited attributes, thus corresponding tuples represented the same entity. The consistency requirement for subtables are: first, each tuple of the subtable can correspond to at most one tuple in each of its immediate subtables. Second, SQL has an additional constraint that all the tuples corresponding to each other must be derived from one tuple or inserted into one table. For example, without the first condition, we could have two tuples in students or teachers that corresponding to the same person. The second condition rules out a tuple in people corresponding to both a tuple in student and a tuple in teachers unless all these tuples are implicitly present because a tuple was inserted in table teaching assistants, which is a subtable of both teachers and students. Since SQL Standard 99 does not support multiple inheritance, the second condition actually prevents a person from being both a teacher and a student. Even if multiple inheritance were supported, the same problem would arise if the subtable teaching assistants were absent. Obviously, it would be useful to model a situation where a person can be a teacher and a student, even if a common subtable teaching assistant is not present. Thus, it can be useful to remove the second consistency constraint. Doing so would allow an object to have multiple types without requiring it to have a more specific type. For example, suppose we again have the type person with subtypes student and teacher and the corresponding table people with the subtables teachers and students. We can then have a tuple in teacher and a tuple in student corresponding to the same tuple in people. There is no need to have a type teaching assistant that is a subtype of both student and teacher. We need not create a type teaching assistant unless we wish to store extra attributes or redefine methods in a manner specific to people who are both students and teachers. SQL unfortunately prohibits such a situation because of consistency requirements too. Next, let's see array and multiset types in SQL. SQL supports two collection types, arrays and multisets. Array types are added in SQL 99 while multiset types were added in SQL 2003. A multiset is an unordered collection where an element may occur multiple times. Multisets are like sets except that a set allows each element to occur at most once. Suppose we wish to record information about books, including a set of keywords for each book, and suppose also that we wish to store the names of authors of a book as an array. Unlike elements in a multiset, the elements of an array are ordered, so we can distinguish the first author from the second author, and so on. The following example illustrates how these arrays and multiset values attributes can be defined in SQL. Create type publisher as name of type varchar20, branch of type varchar20. Then create type book as title of varchar20, author array varchar20, array of size 10. Pub date, that is a publishing date, as date, publisher as publisher, keyword set as varchar20 multiset. Then we create table books of book. The first statement defines a type called publisher with two components, a name and a branch. The second statement defines a structured type book that contains a title and author array, which is an array of up to 10 author names, a publication date, a publisher of type publisher, and a multiset of keywords. Finally, a table book containing tuples of type book is created. Note that an array is used instead of a multiset to store the names of authors, since the ordering of authors generally has some significance, whereas we believe that the ordering of keyword associated with the book is not significant. In general, multi-valued attributes from an ER schema can be mapped to multiset valued attributes in SQL. If ordering is important, SQL arrays can be used instead of multisets. Next, creating and accessing collection values. An array of values can be created in SQL 99 in this way. Array, square brackets open, say Silbasham, code, Sudarshan. Similarly, a multiset of keywords can be constructed as follows. Multiset, square brackets open, computer, database, SQL, and closing square brackets. Thus, we can create a tuple of type defined by the books relation as computers, array of Smith Jones, new publisher, McGraw-Hill, New York, and a multiset parsing analysis. Here we have created a value for the attribute publisher by invoking a constructor function for publisher, which appropriate arguments. Note that this constructor for publisher must be created explicitly, that it is not present by default. It can be declared just like the constructor for name. To insert the preceding tuple into relation books, execute the statement insert into books values compiler array Smith Jones, new publisher McGraw-Hill New York, multiset parsing analysis. Access or update elements of an array by specifying the array index, for example, or the array of 1. Now let's see how to query on collection valued attributes. How to handle collection valued attributes in queries. An expression evaluating to a collection can appear anywhere that a relation name may appear, such as in form clause as following paragraph illustrate. Use the table books that defined earlier. To find all the books that have the word database as one of their keywords, use the query select title from books where database in unnest keyword set. Note that we have used unnest keyword set in a position where SQL without nested relations would have required a select from where subexpression. If you know that a particular book has 3 attributes, authors, we would write select author array of 1, author array of 2, or the array of 3 from books where title is equal to database system concepts. Now suppose that we want a relation containing pairs of the form title author name for each book and each author of the book. We can use this query select b.title comma A dot author from books as B, unnest B dot author array as A of author. Since the author array attribute of books is a collection of valued field, unnest B.author array can be used in a form clause where a relation is expected. Note that the tuple variable B is visible to this expression since it is defined earlier in the from clause. When unnesting an array, a previous query loses information about the ordering of elements in the array. The unnest with ordinality clause can be used to get this information. As illustrated by the following query, this query can be used to generate the author's relation which we saw earlier from the books relation. Select title A.author A.position from books as B, unnest B.author array with ordinality as A author, position. The with ordinality clause generates an extra attribute that records the position of the element in the array. A similar query, but without the with ordinality clause, can be used to generate the keyword relation. The nesting and unnesting. The transformation of a nested relation into a form which fewer or no relation values attributes is called unnesting. The books relation has two attributes, author array and keyword set. That are collections, and two attributes, title and publisher, that are not. Suppose that we want to convert the relation into a single flat relation with no nested relations or structure types as attributes, we can use the following query to carry out the task. Select title A.author, publisher.name as pubname, publisher.branch as pubbranch, k.keyword from books as B, unnest B.author array as A of author, unnest B.keyword set as K keyword. The variable B in the from clause is declared to range over books. The variable A is declared to range over the authors in author array for the book B, and K is declared to range over the keywords in the keyword set of the book B. And figure shows the relation which we call flat books. That is a result of the preceding query. Note that the relation flat books is in first normal form since all its attributes are atomic valued. The reverse process of transforming a first normal form relation into a nested relation is called a nesting. Nesting can be carried out by an extension of grouping in SQL. In the normal use of grouping in SQL, a temporary multiset relation is logically created for each group, and an aggregate function is applied on the temporary relation to get a single atomic value. The collect function returns the multiset of values. So instead of creating a single value, we can create a nested relation. Suppose that we are given the first normal form relation flat books as in figure. The following query nests the relation on the attribute keyword. Select a title, author, publisher, that is pub name, pub branch as publisher. Collect keyword as keyword set from flat books. Group by title, author, publisher. If we want to nest the author attribute also into a multiset, we can use the query select title, collect author as author set, publisher, pub name, pub branch as publisher, collect keyword as keyword set from flat books, group by title, publisher. Another approach to creating nested relations is to use subqueries in the select clause. An advantage of the subquery approach is that an order by clause can be used in the subquery to generate results in the order desired for the creation of an array. The following query illustrates this approach. The keyword array and multiset specify that an array and multiset are to be created from the results of the subqueries. Select title, array, select author from authors as A, where A.title equal to B.title, order by A.position as author array. Publisher, pub name, pub branch as publisher. Multiset, select keyword from keywords as K, where K.title equal to B.title as keyword set from books 4 as B. The system executes the nested queries in the select clause for each tuple generated by the from and where clauses of the outer query. Observe that the attributes b.title from the outer query is used in the nested queries to ensure that only the correct sets of authors or keywords are generated for each title. SQL 2003 provides a variety of operators on multisets, including a function setM that returns a duplicate free version of the multiset M, an intersection aggregate operation which returns the intersection of all the multisets in the group, a fusion aggregate operation which returns the union of all multisets in the group, and a sub-multiset predicate which checks if a multiset is contained in another multiset. The SQL standard does not provide any way to update multiset attributes except by assigning a new value. For example, to delete a value v from the multiset attribute A, we would have to set it to A except all multiset of B. Now let's move to the next section, object identity and reference types in SQL. Object-oriented languages provide the ability to refer to objects. An attribute of a type can be a reference to an object of a specified type. For example, in SQL, we can define a type department with a field name and a field head that is a reference to the type person and the table departments of the type department as follows. Create type department, name varchar 20, head ref, person, scope, people. Create table department of department. Here, the reference is restricted to tuples of the table people, and restriction of the scope of a reference to tuples of a table is mandatory in SQL. And it makes reference behave like foreign keys. We can omit the declaration scope people from the type declaration and instead make an addition to the create table statement as create table departments of department head with option scope people. A reference to table must have an attribute that stores the identifier of the tuple. We declare this attribute called the self-referential attribute by adding a ref is clause to the create table statement. So create table people of person ref is person ID system generated. Here people ID is an attribute name, not a keyword, and the create table statement specifies that the identifier is generated automatically by the database. In order to initialize a reference attribute, we need to get the identifier of the tuple that is to be referred. We can get the identifier value of a tuple by means of query. Just to create a tuple with a reference value, we may first create the tuple with a null reference and then set the reference separately. So insert into departments values cs, null, update departments, set head is equal to select p.person id from people as p, where name is equal to John, where name is equal to cs. An alternative to system-generated identifier is to allow users to generate identifiers. The type of the self-referential attribute must be specified as part of the type definition of the referred table, and the table definition must specify that the reference is user-generated. Create type person, name varchar 20, address varchar 20, ref using varchar 20. Create a table people of person, ref is person ID, user generated. When inserting a tuple of people, we must then provide a value for the identifier. Insert into people, person ID, name, address, values 01284567, John 23, Coyote Run. No other tuple for people or its super tables or subtables can have the same identifier. We can then use the identifier value when inserting a tuple into departments without the need for a separate query to retrieve the identifier. Insert into departments values cs 01284567. It is even possible to use an existing primary key value as the identifier by including the ref from clause in the type definition. Create type person, name varchar 20, primary key, address varchar 20, ref from name, create table people of person, ref is person ID, derived. Note that the table definition must specify that the reference is derived and must still specify a self-referential attribute name. When inserting a tuple for departments, we can then use insert into departments values CS John. References are dereferenced in SQL 99 by using the dereference symbol or the arrow symbol. Consider the departments table defined earlier. We can use this query to find the names and addresses of all heads of the departments. Select head dereference name, head dereference addresses from departments. An expression such as head dereference name is called a path expression. Since head is the reference to a tuple in the people table, the attribute name in the preceding query is the name attribute of the tuple from the people table. References can be used to hide join operations. In the preceding example, without the references, the head field of department would be declared a foreign key of the table people. To find the name and addresses of the head of the department, we would require an explicit join of the relations departments and people. The use of references simplifies the query considerably. We can use the operations deref to return the tuple pointed to by a reference, and then access its attributes as shown below. Select deref head.name from departments. Now let's see to the part implementation of OR features in databases. Object relational database systems are basically extensions of existing relational database systems. Changes are clearly required at many levels of the database system. However, to minimize changes to the storage system code, the complex data types supported by object relational systems can be translated to the simpler type systems of relational databases. To understand how to do this translation, we need look only at how some features of the ER model are translated into relations. For instance, multi-valued attributes in the ER model corresponds to multi-set values attributes in the object relational model. Composite attributes roughly correspond to structured types. ESA hierarchies in the ER model corresponds to table inheritance in the object relational model. The techniques for converting ER model features to tables can be used with some extensions to translate object relational data to relational data at the storage level. Subtables can be stored in an efficient manner without replication of all inherited fields in one or more ways. Each table stores the primary key, which may be inherited from a parent table, and the attributes that are defined locally. Inherited attributes other than the primary key do not need to be stored and can be derived by means of a join with the super table based on the primary key. Each table stores all inherited and locally defined attributes. When a tuple is inserted, it is stored only in the table in which it is inserted, and its presence is inferred in each of the super tables. Access to all attributes of a tuple is faster since a join is not required. However, in case the type system allows an entity to be represented in two subtables without being present in the common subtable of both, this representation can result in a replication of information. Further, it is hard to translate foreign keys referred to a super table into constraints on subtables. To implement such foreign key efficiency, the super table has to be defined as a view, and the database system would have to support foreign keys on views. Implementations may choose to represent array and multi-set types directly, or may choose to use a normalized representation internally. Normalized representations tends to take up more space and require an extra join or grouping cost to collect data in an array or multiset. However, normalized representation may be easier to implement. The ODBC and JDBC application program interfaces have been extended to retrieve and store structured types. JDBC provides a method getObject that is similar to getString but returns a Java struct object from which the components of the structured type can be extracted. It is also possible to associate a Java class with an SQL structured type, and JDBC will then convert between the types. Now let's see what are persistent programming languages. A persistent programming language is a programming language extended with constructs to handle persistent data. Persistent programming languages can be distinguished from languages with embedded SQL in at least two ways. First, With an embedded language, the type system of the host language usually differs from the type system of the data manipulation language. The programmer is responsible for any type conversions between the host language and SQL. Having the programmer carry out this task has several drawbacks. The code to convert between objects and tuples operates outside the object-oriented type system and hence has a higher chance of having undetected error. And conversion between the object-oriented format and the relation format of tuples in the database takes a substantial amount of code. The format translation code, along with the code for loading and unloading data from a database, can form a significant percentage of the total code required for an application. In contrast, in a persistent programming language, the query language is fully integrated with the host language and both share the same type system. Objects can be created and stored in the database without any explicit type or format changes. Any format changes required are carried out transparently. Second, the programmer using an embedded query language is responsible for writing explicit code to fetch data from the database into memory. If any updates are performed, the programmer must write code explicitly to store the updated data back in the database. In contrast, in a persistent programming language, the programmer can manipulate persistent data without writing code explicitly to fetch it into memory or store it back to disk. In this section, we describe how object-oriented programming languages such as C++ and Java can be extended to make them persistent programming languages. These languages switches allow programmers to manipulate data directly from the programming language without having to go through a data manipulation language such as SQL. They thereby provide tighter integration of the programming language with the database than, for example, embedded SQL. There are certain drawbacks to persistent programming languages, however, that we must keep in mind when deciding whether to go or use them. Since the programming language is usually a powerful one, it is relatively easy to make programming errors that damage the database. The complexity of the language makes automatic high-level optimization, such as to reduce the disk input-output, harder. Support for declarative querying is important for many applications, but persistent programming languages currently do not support declarative query well. In this section, we describe a number of conceptual issues that must be addressed when adding persistence to the existing programming language. We first address language independent issue, and in subsequent sections we discuss issues that are specific to C++ and Java language. Now let's see persistence of objects. Object-oriented programming language already have a concept of objects, a type system to define object types and construct to create objects. However, these objects are transient. They vanish when the program terminates, just as variables in Java or C program vanish when the program terminates. If we wish to turn such a language into a database programming language, the first step is to provide a way to make objects persistent. Several approaches have been proposed. First one is persistence by class. The simplest but least convenient way is to declare that a class is persistent. All objects of the class are then persistent objects by default. Objects of non-persistent classes are all transient. This approach is not flexible, since it is often useful to have both transient and persistent objects in a single class. Many object-oriented database systems interpret declaring a class to the persistent as saying that objects in the class potentially can be made persistent, rather than all objects in the class are persistent. Such classes might more appropriately called persistable classes. Next is persistence by creation. In this approach, a new syntax is introduced to create persistent objects by extending the syntax for creating transient objects. Thus, an object is either persistent or transient depending on how it was created. Several object-oriented database systems follow this approach. Another one is a persistence by marking. A variant of the preceding approach is to mark objects as persistent after they are created. All objects are created as transient objects, but if an object is to be persistent beyond the execution of the program, it must be marked explicitly as persistent before the program terminates. This approach, unlike the previous one, postpones the decision on persistence on transient until after the object is created. The final one is persistence by reachability. One or more objects are explicitly declared as root persistent objects. All other objects are persistent if and only if they are reachable from the root object through a sequence of one or more references. Thus, all objects referenced by, that is, whose object identifiers are stored in the root persistent objects are persistent. But also, all objects referred from these objects are persistent, and objects to which they refer are in turn persistent, and so on. A benefit of this scheme is that it is easy to make entire data structure persistent by merely declaring the root of such structures as persistent. However, the database system has the burden of following chains of references to detect which objects are persistent, and that can be expensive. Now let's see object identity and pointers. In an object-oriented programming language that has not been extended to handle persistence, when an object is created, the system returns a transient object identifier. Transient object identifiers are valid only when the program that created them is executing. After that program terminates, the objects are deleted and the identifier is meaningless. When a persistent object is created, it is assigned a persistent object identifier. A simple way to achieve built-in identity is through pointers to physical locations in the storage. In particular, in many object-oriented languages such as C++, a transient object identifier is actually an in-memory pointer. However, the association of an object with a physical location in a storage may change over time. There are several degrees of permanence of identity. First one is the intra-procedure. Identity persists only during the execution of a single procedure. Examples of inter-procedure identity are local variables within procedures. Intra-program identity persists only during the execution of a single program or query. Examples of intra-program identity are global variables in programming languages. Main memory or virtual memory pointers offer only intra-program identity. Then inter-program identity persists from one program execution to another. Pointers to file system data on disk after inter-program identity, but they may change if the way data is stored in the file system changed. Then persistent identity. Identity persists only among program executions, but also among structural reorganizations of the data. It is the persistent form of identity that is required for object-oriented systems. In persistent extensions of languages such as C++, object identifiers for persistent objects are implemented as persistent pointers. A persistent pointer is a type of pointer that, unlike in-memory pointers, remains valid even after the end of the program execution and across some form of data reorganization. A programmer may use a persistent pointer in the same way that he or she may use an in-memory pointer in a programming language. Conceptually, we may think of a persistent pointer as a pointer to an object in the database. Storage and access of persistent objects. The data part of the object has to be stored individually for each object. Logically, the code that implements methods of a class should be stored in the database as part of the database schema, along with the type definitions of the classes. However, many implementations simply store the code in files outside the database to avoid having to integrate system software such as compilers with the database system. There are several ways to find objects in the database. One way is to give names to objects, just as we give names to files. This approach works for a relatively small number of objects, but does not scale well with the millions of objects. A second way is to expose object identifiers or persistent pointer to the objects, which can be stored externally. Unlike names, these pointers do not have to be mnemonic, and they can even be physical pointers to a database. A third way is to store collections of objects and to allow programs to iterate over the collections to find the required objects. Collections of objects can themselves be modeled as objects of a collection type. Collection types include sets, multisets, lists, and so on. Most object-oriented database systems support all three ways of accessing persistent objects. Now let's see persistent C++ systems. There are several object-oriented databases based on persistent extensions to C++. There are differences among them in terms of the system architecture, yet they have many common features in terms of programming language. Several of the object-oriented features of the C++ language provide support for persistence without changing the language itself. For example, we can declare a class called persistent object with the attributes and methods to support persistence. Any other class that should be persistent can be made a subclass of this class and thereby inherit the support of persistence. The C++ language also lets us redefine standard functions names and operations such as plus, minus, the pointer difference operators, selection operator, and so on, according to the types of the operands on which they are applied. This ability is called overloading. It is used to redefine operators to behave in the required manner when they are operating on persistent objects. Providing persistent support via class libraries has the benefit of making only minimal changes to C++ necessary. Moreover, it is relatively easy to implement. However, it has the drawback that the programmer has to spend much more time to write a program that handles persistent objects, and it is not easy for the programmers to specify integrity constraints on the schema or to provide support for the declarative querying. Some persistent C++ implementations support extensions to C++ syntax to make these tasks easier. The following aspects need to be addressed when adding persistent supports to C++. First one is the persistent pointers. A new data type has to be defined to represent persistent pointers. For example, the ODMG C++ standard defines a template class dref after t to represent persistent pointers to a class t. Dereference operator on this class is redefined to fetch the object from disk if not already present in the memory, and it returns an in-memory pointer to the buffer where the object has been fetched. Thus, if P is persistent pointer to class T, one can use standard syntax such as P selection A or P selection F of P to access attributes A of class T or invoke methods F of class T. The object store database system uses a different approach to persistent pointers. It uses normal pointer types to store persistent pointers. This poses two problems. First one is in-memory pointer size may be only 4 bytes, which is too small to use with the database larger than 4 megabytes. And second, when an object is moved on disk, in-memory pointed to its old physical location are meaningless. Object Store uses a technique called hardware sizzling to address both problems. It prefetches objects from the database into memory and replaces persistent pointers with in-memory pointers. And when data are stored back on disk, the memory pointers are replaced by persistent pointers. When on disk, the value stored in the in-memory pointer field is not the actual persistent pointer. Instead, the value is looked up in a table that contains the full persistent pointer value. Creation of persistent objects. The C++ new operator is used to create persistent object by defining an overloaded version of the operator that takes extra arguments specifying that it should be created in the database. Thus, instead of a new t, one would call a new db of t to create persistent object where db identifies the database. Class extents. Class extents are created and maintained automatically for each class. The ODMG C++ standard requires the name of the class to be passed as an additional parameter to the new operation. This also allows multiple extents to be maintained for a class by passing different names. Relationships between classes are often represented by storing pointers from each object to the object to which it is related. Object related to multiple objects of a given class store a set of pointers. Thus, if a pair of objects is in a relationship, each should store a pointer to the other. Persistent C++ systems provide a way to specify such integrity constraints and to enforce them by automatically creating and deleting pointers. For example, if a pointer is created from an object A to an object B, a pointer to A is added automatically to object B. Iterator interface. Since programs need to iterate over class members, an interface is required to iterate over members of a class extent. The iterator interface also allows selections to be specified so that only objects satisfying the selection predicate need to be fetched. transactions. Persistent C++ systems provide support for starting a transaction and for committing it or rolling it back. Updates. One of the goals of providing persistent support in a programming language is to allow transparent persistence. That is, a function that operates on an object should not need to know that the object is persistent. The same function can thus be used on objects regardless of whether they are persistent or not. Some persistent extensions to C++ require the programmer to specify explicitly that the object has been modified by calling a function marked modified. In addition to increasing programmer effort, this approach increases the chance that programming errors can result in a corrupt database. If a programmer omits a call to mark modified, it is possible that one update made by a transaction may never be propagated to the database, while another update made by the same transaction is propagated, violating atomicity of transactions. Other systems such as Object Store use memory protection support provided by the operating system or hardware to detect writes to a block of memory and mark the block as a dirty block that should be written later to disk. Query language. Iterators provide support for simple selection queries. To support more complex queries, persistent C++ systems define a query language. A large number of object-oriented database systems based on C++ were developed in the late 80s and early 90s. However, the market for such databases turned out to be much smaller than anticipated, since most application requirements are more than met using SQL through interfaces such as ODBC or JDBC. As a result, most of the object-oriented database systems developed in the period do not exist any longer. Now let's see persistent Java systems. Java Database Objects or JDO model for object persistence in Java programs differ from the model of persistence support in C++ programs. Among its features are persistence by reachability. Objects are not explicitly created in a database. Explicitly registering an object as persistent using the makePersistent method of the persistent manager class makes the object persistent. In addition, any object reachable from a persistent object becomes persistent. Then bytecode enhancement. Instead of declaring a class to be persistent in Java code, classes whose objects may be made persistent are specified in a configuration file with a suffix of .jdo. An implementation specific enhancer program is executed that reads the configuration file and carries out two tasks. First, it may create structures in a database to store objects of the class. Second, it modifies the bytecode to handle tasks related to persistence. Below are some examples of such modification. Any code that accesses an object could be changed to check first if the object is in memory, and if not, take steps to bring it to memory. And any code that modifies an object is modified to record additionally that the object has been modified, and perhaps to save a pre-updated value used in case the update needs to be undone. Other modifications to the bytecode may also be carried out. And database mapping, JDO, does not define how data are stored in the backend database. For example, a common scenario is to store objects in a relational database. The enhancer program may create an appropriate schema in the database to store class objects. How exactly it does this is implementation dependent and not defined by JDO. Some attributes could be mapped to relational attributes, while others may be stored in a serialized format. Treated as a binary object by the database. JDO implementation may allow existing relational data to be viewed as objects by defining an appropriate mapping. Class extents. Class extents are created and maintained automatically for each class declared to be persistent. All objects made persistent are added automatically to the class extent corresponds to their class. JDO programs may access a class extent and iterate over selected members. The iterator interface provided by Java can be used to create iterations on class extents and step through the members of the class extent. JDO also allows selections to be specified when the iterator is created on a class extent and only objects satisfying the selections are fetched. Single reference type. There is no difference in type between a reference to a transient object and a reference to a persistent object. And in-memory index structure mapping persistent objects to the in-memory references is required to implement this scheme. In writing objects back to disk, This index will be used to replace in-memory reference with the persistent pointers in the copy returned to disk. Now let's see the object-oriented versus object-relational systems. We have now studied object-relational database, which are object-oriented database built on top of relational model, as well as object-oriented database, which are built around persistent programming languages. Each of these approaches target a different market. The declarative nature and limited power of the SQL language provides good protection of data from programming errors and makes high-level optimization such as reducing input-output relatively easy. Object relational systems aim at making data modeling and querying easier by using complex data types. Typical applications include storage and querying of complex data, including multimedia data. A declarative language such as SQL, however, imposes a significant performance penalty for certain kinds of applications that run primarily in main memory and that perform a large number of accesses to the database. Persistent programming languages target such applications that have high performance requirements. They provide low overhead access to persistent data and eliminate the need for data translation if the data are to be manipulated by a programming language. However, they are more susceptible to data corruption by programming errors, and they usually do not have a powerful querying capability. Typical applications include CAD databases. Object relational mapping system allow programmers to build application using an object model while using a traditional database system to store the data. Thus, they combine the robustness of widely used relational database systems with the power of object models for writing applications. However, they suffer from overhead of data conversion between the object model and the relational model used to store data. We can summarize the strength of the various kinds of database systems in this way. Relational systems, simple data types, powerful query language, high protection. Persistent programming language based OODBs, complex data types, integration with the programming language, high performance. Object relational systems, complex data types, powerful query language, high protection. Object relational mapping system, complex data types integrated with the programming languages, designed as a layer on top of relational database systems. These descriptions hold in general, but keep in mind that some database systems blur the boundaries. For example, object-oriented database systems built around a persistent programming language can be implemented on top of a relational or object-relational database system. Such systems may provide lower performance than object-oriented database systems built directly on a storage system, but provide some of the stronger protection guarantees of relational systems. This concludes the session and our third module. We'll take a new topic in the next class. Thank you for listening.